Hello. My name is Kelly Asprooth-Jackson, and I am one of the ministers here. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society. Today I am joined by my colleague, the Reverend Kelly Crocker, and by the worship team of Drew Collins, Linda Warren, Heather Thorpe, and Daniel Carnes. The mission of FUS is growing souls, connecting with one another, and embodying our UU values in our lives, our community, and our world. For those connecting with us virtually today, we are so glad that you are with us, and we hope that you will be able to join us for our virtual coffee hour immediately following today's service. The information for joining can be found on the homepage of our website, fusmadison.org, as well as on the slide that will be seen again after the postlude. Our announcement slides will also be shown briefly after today's service, and we encourage you to take a moment and learn about upcoming programs and activities. We have two announcements to highlight today. The first is that child dedications will be held next weekend, April 2nd and 3rd. If you would like to have your child included in this ceremony of blessing and welcome, please contact the Reverend Kelly Crocker by Thursday of this coming week. We also want to bring to your attention that as of April 9th, so that's 2 weekends from now, our mask policy here will be changing. All of the information you need can be found in the Red Floors email that went out this past Friday. Please do let us know if you have any questions. And now, I invite you to join me in a moment of silence to center ourselves, bring ourselves fully into this time as we join together once again in community. Be it real or metaphor, whatever is in your backpack or your briefcase or your purse that you've brought into this sanctuary that is weighing you down, leave it behind.
Whatever you are carrying that is keeping you distracted or caught up in shame or guilt or hopelessness, leave it behind.
If you need it, it will be there when we're done. But for this hour, just let it go.
Come into this place with open hearts.
Come into this place with a soul that has remembered how to be tender again.
Come into this place with a renewed hope for this world.
Come into this place ready to build a world we've always been worthy of and have always dreamed of. And now I will invite you to rise in body and or spirit, and please join me in the words of aspiration for the kindling of our chalice flame. For every time we make a mistake and we decide to start again, we light this chalice. For every time we are lonely and we let someone be our friend, we light this chalice. For every time we are disappointed and we choose to hope, we light this chalice.
I know these roads will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know these roads will open. Please join me in singing hymn number 83, Winds Be Still. Winds be still, storm clouds pass and silence come. Peace, grace this time will
Friends, I'd like to tell you a story today that comes to us from the Hindu tradition. Hinduism is one of the largest religions in the world. It's the majority religion, the nation of India. And the story is, the Indian name is Samudra Manthana, but it's fair to call it the churning of the ocean of milk. You see, in this story, the gods, there are a great many gods in the Hindu cosmology, all the gods had lost their strength, and so they had to churn the ocean of milk, obviously. Maybe I should back up. So, an elephant had refused to wear a garland of flowers, and that is why the gods had lost their strength and so needed to churn the ocean of milk. Okay, one more time. So, there was a very holy person, and he gave a garland of flowers to Indra, the king of the gods. And Indra had an elephant that he dearly loved, and he put the garland of flowers on the elephant's neck. But the flowers attracted bees. The elephant didn't want to be stung by the bees, so it leaned over far enough that the garland fell off of its neck and landed on the ground. And that holy person who'd given the gift in the first place was very offended that the flowers had touched the ground. So he cursed the gods, and that's why they lost their strength, and that's why they had to churn the ocean of milk. All right, I see why there's still a missing piece there, but we're going to get to that. So again, for the premise of this story, you have to understand there was an ocean of milk, a whole ocean full of milk. Now, there are a lot of different ways to churn milk, and one of the ways that's common in India is you take a stick with something on the end of it, and you put it down in the milk, and you just swish it back and forth real fast like that, either with your hands, or maybe you wind a cord around it and sort of run the cord back and forth. So that's what they did. They picked up a mountain, and they put it in the middle of the ocean of milk. And they got the longest snake in the universe, the king of all the snakes. His body is miles and miles long, and they coiled it around the top of the mountain. But like I said, the gods had lost their strength, so they weren't strong enough to do this on their own. They had to ask for help from the demons. In Hindu cosmology, there are a whole bunch of demons as well as a whole bunch of gods. And while, generally speaking, the gods sort of want things to be better for human beings, and the demons sort of want things to be worse, it's more complicated than that. They're each able to make their own decisions, just like you and I are, so sometimes demons make good choices, and sometimes gods make bad choices. And sometimes they work together, like in this story. So the gods and the demons got together to churn the ocean of milk. And the gods went on one side of the snake, and the demons went on the other side of the snake. There was a dispute about who was going to get which side. And the demons thought since they were stronger right now, they should get the head of the snake. Obviously, the head of the snake is the much more impressive position than the tail. The gods said that was fine because they knew that this particular snake, when it gets angry, spits poisonous fire. And so that didn't go so well for the demons. But still, they were pulling their end. So they're pulling on their end of the snake and twisting them out in one way. And then the gods would pull on their end of the snake and twist them out in the other way. And in this way, it just churned the ocean of milk. Now, as that churning was happening, lots of marvelous things floated up from the bottom of the ocean to the top. There's a magical conch shell and a gem so beautiful you've never seen anything like it in your life. A whole bunch of elephants, 7-headed horse, a cow that grants wishes, and a whole bunch of people on top of all of that. And the last person to come up from the bottom of the ocean to the top was a physician, the greatest doctor in the universe. And he was holding the most powerful medicine that ever has been. And with that medicine, he was able to cure the curse and restore the gods to their former strength. Now, I bet you're wondering, can this be the only great religious story from the world's traditions that so focuses on dairy products? My very honest answer is that I'm not sure. But I live in Wisconsin now, so we're going to find out together.
I invite you now into a time of giving and receiving where we give freely and generously to this offering, which sustains our community here and also supports the work of our outreach offering recipient. This week, our offering is shared with the Odyssey Project, an award-winning UW-Madison project that takes a whole family approach to breaking the cycle of generational poverty through access to education. It has empowered more than 500 low-income adults to find their voices and get a jump start at earning college degrees they never thought possible. Using a 6-credit English literature course, UW-Madison faculty members introduce adults to great works of literature, philosophy, history, and art, and help them improve skills in writing and critical thinking. Some graduates of the program have journeyed from homelessness to UW-Madison degrees, from incarceration to meaningful work in the community. You'll see on your screen that you can donate directly from our website, fusmadison.org. You will see the text to give information there as well. There are also baskets here in the auditorium. And we thank you, as always, for your generosity and your faith in this life we create together.
The spring and days at the morn, mornings at 7, the hillsides do prove the years at the spring. And days at the morn, the larks on the wings, the snails on the thorn, God's in his hand, God's in his hand, all's right.
Just slightly less than 6 years ago, I took a trip to visit my youngest brother. This was back when he lived full-time in Ramallah, which is the de facto capital of the Palestinian West Bank. During that visit, I went into the city of Jerusalem a few different times. And on one of those times, I found my way, almost completely by accident, to the Chapel of the Ascension. The chapel sits on the Mount of Olives, overlooking the old city. It consists of a small white stone cupola within a larger walled compound and houses the stone on which the teacher Jesus is said to have stood when he ascended to heaven in the story told at the beginning of the book of Acts. That night, I spent a while reading Wikipedia entries about the various places I'd explored that day, something I did a lot of on that trip, wanting to fact-check things that guides and passers-by had told me about the numerous holy sites. One of the things I learned is that the stone at the Chapel of the Ascension is only half of what was originally there. That original stone was cut in two, and the other half taken elsewhere several centuries ago. Presumably now they just have the one footprint. But even more importantly, I learned that the same complex that houses the stone includes a tomb with 3 possible occupants. And that tomb was the reason that I felt I had to go back to the shrine. This is the debate over who lies buried in that tomb. The Jewish argument is that it is the resting place of Huldah, a figure mentioned very briefly in the Hebrew Bible in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. Although she doesn't get a lot of detail in either account, she's notable for being specifically identified as a prophet. There are very few women specifically named as prophets in Judaism, or in Christianity, or in Islam, for that matter. The Christian position on this tomb is that it holds the remains of Saint Pelagia, who, according to legend, was an extremely successful and wealthy sex worker in the city of Antioch during the relatively early days of the Christian church. And eventually, she chose to live as a man in order to be accepted among the monastics who lived in the hills overlooking Jerusalem. Finally, the Muslim perspective is that this contested tomb is the burial place of Rabia Al-Basri, a woman and a wali, the Arabic term usually translated as saint. The story goes that after she was captured and enslaved by bandits, the man who purchased her recognized her holiness and virtue, and so he offered to give her his house and become her slave instead. She chose the third option. She accepted her freedom and went to live by herself. The tomb is not a tourist attraction, nor is it even a draw for pilgrims. The dispute as to exactly who lies there prevents that, and the doors that lead to the place are kept locked and unmarked. Sometime, perhaps, I will tell you the story of how my brother and I made it past those doorways. For now, I'm just going to summarize and say that sometimes a very earnest, however clumsy, attempt to speak to someone in their own native language can be very persuasive, and that the most effective way to earn the trust of a child is to trust them and to follow their lead. It was in this way that my brother and I gained the rare privilege of standing alone in a stone room cut into the Mount of Olives. Beneath our feet, below the cenotaph that marked the holy site, lay the remnants of a human body, the exact name and identity of which I know not for certain. Our tradition as Unitarian Universalists adores and celebrates the life of the mind, subjecting all doctrine, all ritual, all tradition to skeptical consideration and critical inquiry. The great Unitarian poet Walt Whitman summarized this well in his moral instruction to re-examine all you have been told at school or church or in any book, dismiss whatever insults your own soul. But our great love of human thought sometimes comes at the expense of a love for and attention to the human body. The dismissal or even derision of the body in preference to some element of the self seen as separate from it, such as the mind or the soul, is a bad habit all too common among contemporary religions. It is far from universal, but it can be found in at least some form of many faiths, ours most certainly included. Now, even if this habit is common, it's far from inescapable. Nearly all forms of indigenous or earth-centered religion are necessarily grounded in the bodies of the people who live and practice them. For it is our bodies which connect us to the earth, which we inhabit and which all of us are manifestations of. The molecules of ourselves are the molecules of our planet brought into specific arrangements. We are the earth, upright and proud, as Kenneth Patton, once the minister of this congregation, wrote. Even a tradition which emphasizes the spiritual can ennoble the body rather than discarding it. In the religion of ancient Egypt, there was a belief that after the body dies, the soul travels to the afterlife to be judged. And this judgment was made by taking the heart, the literal, physical heart, and putting it onto a scale. On the other side of that scale, the heart would be measured against a single feather, representing the concept of ma'at, which means something like justice, but also truth and harmony and every good deed it is possible to do. If the scale balanced, the soul would go on to the afterlife. But if it tipped, because the heart was too heavy with bad choices, the heart itself would fall off into the waiting mouth of a monster named Amit, which is sort of a combination of lion and crocodile and hippopotamus. Now, if all this sounds academic so far, okay, some religious systems give more or less importance and attention to the body as the self. So what? Let us attend to just how destructive this manner of thinking can be. Because where the body is not cherished and celebrated, it almost inevitably becomes targeted and attacked. Reason, compassion, courage, all other manner of virtues become associated with the mind or the spirit, while moral failures and faults get assigned to the body. Consider just the language of base instincts or animal urges. So much of the culture we live in teaches us to distrust our bodies, or even to fear or to hate them. All our bodies collectively, our own bodies individually, and each other's bodies specifically. Most of us, now or at some past or future time of our lives, have some quality or component or inability of our bodies that we are unhappy about, that we wish we could change to be more like someone else or our own selves in the past. Now, I bless and celebrate it if you don't resonate with that, but whole vast sectors of our economy are premised on most of us feeling uncomfortable in our own skin most of the time. Half a century ago, Frank Zappa asked and answered this musical question. What's the ugliest part of your body? What's the ugliest part of your body? Some say your nose, some say your toes, but I think it's your mind. I think it's your mind. Now, we might just read that as a pessimistic provocation. He was good at those. But I want to take it seriously for a moment. What's the ugliest part of your body? The only possible answer to that question is your mind, because your mind is the only component of yourself that could have come up with the idea that any part of your own precious self is ugly. And the distance between our criticisms of our own physical forms and the fear and distrust of differences in the characteristics and behaviors of the bodies of others, that is, the root of all racism, of transphobia and homophobia, of fat phobia and ableism. The distance between those things is very, very short. In her influential book, The Body is Not an Apology, activist and author Sonia Renee Taylor spells out the way in which shame and guilt about the particular uniqueness of our bodies, their sizes and shapes, their colors and aesthetic details, the things that they can do and the things they cannot do. That our shame about these things is not just an expression of oppression, it's the mechanism by which oppression is accomplished. Folks get trained to apologize for their bodies in a million different ways in the course of life, in any and every way that those bodies don't match some standard of what is normal or ideal. And where that apology isn't volunteered, it may instead be coerced or extracted. Just this week, 2 different women in the public eye, student athlete Leah Thomas and Supreme Court nominee Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, have both been under attack for living fully in their bodies and refusing to apologize for it. What this calls for, Sonia Renee Taylor writes, is a radical commitment for each of us to love ourselves and particularly to love our bodies. In her words, humans are a varied and divergent bunch with all manner of beliefs, morals, values, and ideas. We have struggled to find agreement on much of anything over the centuries. Just think about how we argued about gravity and whether the world is shaped like a pizza. But here is a completely non-controversial statement I think we have consensus around. You, my dear, have a body. And should you desire to remain on this spinning rock hurtling through space, you will need a body to do it. Everything else we think we know is up for debate. Are we spiritual beings? Depends whom you ask. Do humans have souls? Been fighting about that since Aristotle likened the souls of fetuses to those of vegetables. But bodies, yep, we got those. And given this widely agreed upon reality, it seems to me, if ever there were a place where the practice of radical love could be a transformative force, the body ought to be that location. In the Jewish tradition, and this is one of the many, many qualities it has in common with Islam, by the way, there is a blessing for nearly everything. If it is possible for a human being to do, and a good, or a necessary, or even just an acceptable thing for them to do, there is some sort of a prayer which might be recited after doing it. Just one example of how beautiful and specific this can get is in the blessing which is meant to be recited by a person after peeing or pooping. And if hearing me name in plain terms from the pulpit something that we all do every day is a little uncomfortable for you, let me say first that it is for me too, and that maybe that's a sign that we still have some work to do to move into a fully comfortable relationship with our bodies together. Here is the blessing. Blessed is the one who has formed humanity in wisdom and created in the body many orifices and cavities. It is obvious and known before your throne of glory that if one of them were to be ruptured or one of them blocked, it would be impossible for a person to survive and stand before you. Blessed are you that heals all flesh and does wonders. Our bodies are miraculous. Every single one of them. Not just in times of health or extraordinary physical performance, not just able bodies, not just fit bodies, whatever that means, not just cis bodies, not just neurotypical bodies. All bodies are miraculous. A little thought experiment that I am cribbing from a comic book that I dearly loved in my late adolescence. Imagine being offered a shot glass of water and carbon and some other trace elements. Now take those very simple materials, and from them, please build me a camera with color and rich detail and peripheral pickup. That is to say, make an eye. Now, there are many different sorts of eyes, and some see more clearly than others. Some do not see at all. And of course, there are bodies that do not have eyes to begin with. But every single part that makes up each of the luminous mysteries that are our own precious physical selves is equally wondrous to this. The long eons of evolution which have wrought life out into our own particular unique shapes by processes and out of origins, some of which we understand and some of which we are still working to understand, have entrusted to us flesh and blood and bone. And every last one of those gifts is worthy of celebration and gratitude. The poet Marie Howe, writing to her brother John after he had lost his battle with AIDS, said in part, "We want the spring to come and the winter to pass. We want whoever to call or not to call. A letter, a kiss, we want more and more and more of it, but there are moments walking when I catch a glimpse of myself in the window glass, say the window of the corner video store, and I'm gripped by a cherishing so deep for my own blowing hair, chapped face, and unbuttoned coat that I'm speechless. I am living. I remember you." Our faith as Unitarian Universalists is that the life we share in the present deeply matters, whatever else might happen or might not happen after this life is ended. And this is, I believe, the answer to our sometimes tendency to value the mind or the spirit at the expense of the body. There is no more present, shared reality than the truth that we all have bodies, as Sonia Renee Taylor observes. If this life we share is important, then each and every one of these bodies is as well. It may be as simple in some ways as going back to those words of instruction from Walt Whitman that I shared earlier. To complete his line, he said, "Re-examine all you have been told at school or church or in any book. Dismiss whatever insults your own soul, and your very flesh shall be a great poem, and have the richest fluency not only in its words, but in the silent lines of its lips and face, and between the lashes of your eyes, and in every motion and joint of your body." I do not know for certain whose body lies beneath the tomb I visited that day in Jerusalem. But one of the possibilities is Saint Pelagia. In one account, Pelagia is said to have paraded through the city of Antioch's streets, dressed in sumptuous finery during an important church council, a canny advertisement for her body. All of the clergy assembled were shamed into looking away, except for the local bishop, who stared upon Pelagia's beauty and chided his fellow priests that they ought to take at least as much care for their souls as this person showed their body. The bishop's comments stirred Pelagia's curiosity, who attended his next sermon and soon after converted to Christianity. St. Pelagia is said to have been seized with a powerful religious fervor immediately before and ever after that conversion. They wished to devote their life entirely to prayer, but there was no place for a woman in the Christian asceticism of that time. So Pelagia stole some men's clothing and fled in these garments to a cave on the Mount of Olives. There, Pelagia lived as Pelagius, using the male version of their name, a hermit devoted to contemplation and repentance. The mystery of Pelagia, or Pelagius's own self-understanding, sadly died with them. I cannot say for certain whether they knew themselves to be a woman or a man or neither or both, or if they were simply performing gender out of necessity in order to take on a religious vocation they felt deeply called to, but that was closed off to women in their society. Without knowing this, I can't even say for certain which name they would have wished to be remembered by. But I can say that their body was sacred, because all bodies are. And the place that may or may not be where that body was laid to rest had a holiness to it as well.
Hello there. My name is Michael May. I've been a member of First Unitarian Society so long that people refer to it as time immemorial. And I've also been involved in a number of roles here, including being president of the congregation back in the day. I was raised as a Roman Catholic before I became a UU. There's an old saying that Catholics are very comfortable talking about money, but can't talk about sex. Unitarians, on the other hand, have the exact opposite approach. Well, I'm a sustaining steward. I want you to be one too, but I'm not going to talk about money. And I'm certainly not going to talk about sex. And I'm not going to talk about all the great programs and all the wonderful things that go on here at First Unitarian Society. You know about those, and you hear about them, and you've partaken in them. What I'm here to talk about is me and you together. One thing that makes First Unitarian Society such a sustaining spiritual place for me, and for you, are the relationships we form with other members of the society. You may have met somebody in a class, maybe you met them in the choir, maybe you met them at the coffee hour or at a service, or maybe your kids met in the church school and that's how you met other people. The fact is that I and you know a lot of folks here at First Unitarian Society. And I'm betting that if you're like me, there are some of those friends that you've made here that you haven't seen in a while. The 2-year pandemic has wreaked havoc in many parts of our lives, including First Unitarian Society. I was at a service recently, and I ran into 2 of my old FUS friends who I haven't seen in a while, Connie and David Beam. It was just a delight to see them, to say hello, live and in color, share a few words. These personal connections, I think, are the lifeblood of our congregation. And if you look around you, you'll see there are a lot of empty seats here. Think about some of your FUS friends that you miss. Wouldn't it be great if one of them showed up next week and you saw them here? You could catch up. Think about your other FUS friends that you could give a call to. Ask them if they could come here for a service on a Saturday or a Sunday. Or just ask them out for coffee. There are a lot of relationships that have gotten jangled over the last 2 years. It isn't just going to FUS that some of us have forgotten how to do. It's many of the personal connections we've taken for granted. Now, as spring sort of brings the earth back to life, I think we ought to do what we can to bring back those personal connections at First Unitarian Society. Let's make sure we don't lose them. Let's bring them back. It's something that I and you can do.
Our thanks to Mike for sharing his story with us this morning. Each week we bring ourselves to this time and this place, carrying with us all the concerns and the joys of recent days. We share these here in a spirit of acceptance, knowing they are held in love. This week, we light a candle and send our love and birthday wishes to Cleo Lofts-Gordon, who turns 90 years old today. Happy birthday, Cleo. Leah Sinclair asks us to light a candle for her great joy that she has a new place to live. The apartment lease is signed and the care agency will begin staffing soon. And Leah says, thank you to everyone for your help and support during this unexpected change. And we light a candle of healing for Jane Richardson as she recovers from surgery this past week. And a candle of memory for the Burns family, who lost one of its most treasured members on Friday when Allison Jean Burns, daughter of Joan and big sister to Becky, passed away. Allie never spoke a word in her 59 years, yet she left behind a legacy of lessons to treat all people equally, to love deeply, and that everyone, no matter their abilities, adds to the richness of our world. There will not be a memorial service for Allie, so the family welcomes condolences privately. And we light a candle in solidarity with the people of Ukraine, both in their suffering and their struggle. Together we yearn for peace for them and for all people, and an end to all wars of conquest anywhere and everywhere on earth. Let us join together now in a moment of shared silence and community as we hold all these cares alongside all that lives within our hearts. Blessed be, and amen.
body or in spirit, and join me in singing hymn number 1021, Lean on Me. Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow, but if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride if I have things you need to borrow, for no one can fill those of your needs that you won't let. So lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. If there is a load you have to bear that you can't carry, I'm right up the road, and I'll share your load. If you just call me, lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. You might have a problem that you'd understand. We all need somebody to lean on.
Love it when you take the risk of clapping. We walk this earth but a brief moment in time. Amid our suffering and pain, however great or small, let us continue to learn how to celebrate life. Let us continue to grow in our capacity to love ourselves and each other. And let us continue to move toward the goal of a just world community. Go this day in a renewed spirit of peace and hope, and with the wisdom to greet the new week. But first, please be at rest for the postlude.